What if Makoto and Fatora were twins? Chapter 1. G'day everyone, Rune here. And this is a new What If series covering the El Hazard The Magnificent World anime. For those of you that don't know about this anime, El Hazard is a story about 3 teens and 1 adult from Earth being teleported through time and space to the world of El Hazard, where magic and technology are the same thing and everywhere. Basically, Marvel's interpretation of Asgard, but with more of a Final Fantasy aesthetic. One of the main plot points of the anime is the fact that the main character, Makoto, looks exactly like the princess Fatora, but is male. And I've always wondered about this. Why do they look so alike? Yeah, it's a plot device, but they don't even give it a shrug of God explanation of it's just a coincidence or they're alternate reality versions of each other. So this is going to be a series covering one of the possible explanations and how it could affect the story and the characters. This is, what if Makoto and Fatora were twins? This first chapter is going to be going over the backstory of this AU and explaining how Makoto could have ended up on Earth if he was born on El Hazard, and then getting into the early events of the OVA series. Now let us begin this story. The story starts about 15 years before the start of the anime. The queen has just given birth not to 1 child as the family were expecting, but to twins, so alike in appearance it's hard to tell them apart. The princess they give the name Fatora, and the prince they give the name Montero. I really hope I pronounced that right. I got this name while trying to find the origins of the name Fatora and found that it seems to be a Portuguese surname. However, as the kingdom is celebrating, one group is plotting. The Phantom tribe knew that 2 princesses of El Hazard were needed for their plans. So, if they could get their hands on one while she is still a baby, it could make their plans that much easier. In the night, one of the agents of the tribe is sent to kidnap the infant princess. However, due to her haste and the twins looking so similar, she grabs the wrong one and kidnaps Montero instead. Upon returning to the caves that are the tribe's home, they discover the mix-up. The Phantom tribe's leader is furious, knowing that the palace will be on high alert now that one of their royal children has been taken. Their chance to take the princess early on is gone, and their plans moving forward will now be a lot harder. But there's another problem, one that is brought up by another member of the tribe. What to do with the prince? The leader thinks about this for a minute before grinning. Throw him into the eye of God. Let El Hazard live with the knowledge that their own weapon took their prince from them. Courier does as he commands, throwing the baby prince into the giant moon-like machine. Believing that this would kill an infant, the Phantom tribe watches as El Hazard mourns its prince. However, this did not kill Montero. As the Eye of God is a way to open rips in time and space, it instead sends the baby prince to Earth. Crying out for his family, he is found by a married couple who assume that he had been abandoned. Taking the baby home, they decide to adopt him and name him Makoto. Makoto grows up and eventually goes to high school with Naname, Jinai, and their teacher, Mr. Fujisawa. We now enter the picture after the earthquake that revealed Ifurita's stasis chamber, and the impeachment investigation against Jinai. I should mention that Makoto already knows that he's adopted, but he believes that his birth parents were too young to keep him, thus why his current parents found him in an alley. The night before Makoto is meant to give evidence of Jinai using student government funds to buy votes, he is asked out to the forest behind the school by a letter from Naname, only to find out that it was Jinai. Jinai gives his speech about how Makoto keeps bruising his ego, and Makoto runs away from him. Just as Jinai has him cornered, time freezes and Makoto ends up meeting Ifurita. This is where any actual changes begin. For anyone that has seen El Hazard, you will know that the inciting incident of the story is a time loop, where at the end of the series, Ifurita falls into the Eye of God and is thrown through time and space, eventually ending up where Makoto finds her in the first episode, and she sends all of them to El Hazard, kicking off the series. So in this timeline, as someone from the future, Ifurita would already know that Makoto is the lost prince of El Hazard. and I don't think it's that much of a stretch to think that she would address him as such in their conversation. She would address him as my prince, and when she's about to prepare the technique that allows her to send all of the humans in the school grounds to El-Hazard, she says this: "You must prepare to embark on your journey. With my remaining power, I shall return you to El-Hazard." As if Arita finishes her farewell, a bright flash comes from her and images flash through Makoto's head. Images of people he doesn't know, until finally settling on two girls looking at him and smiling with tears in their eyes. One of whom looks exactly like him. With Ifurita's power taking hold, the entire school and everyone in it is engulfed in light, sending all the humans in the area to El-Hazard. Again, things aren't much different until Venus mistakes Makoto for Fatora, to which he gently corrects her. Venus is understandably shocked. This boy looks exactly like her sister. How could that be possible? Before she can dwell on it further, her chief servant Lons is convincing Makoto and Fujisawa to join them. During their trip, Makoto was looking out over the landscape. Something about it feels familiar, like a lost toy from childhood you forgot you even had. As he's trying to figure this out, he's approached by Venus, who asks him to tell her about his homeland and his life there. Makoto decides to indulge her, and begins telling her about Shinonome, about their technology, his life in school, and the events that led to him and Mr. Fujisawa being in El-Hazard. Venus listens attentively to everything, occasionally making small comments here and there, until Makoto is distracted by the local flora and fauna asking Venus what all of it is, to which she indulges him. After arriving at Florishtika, they are treated to dinner where Makoto and Mr. Fujisawa tell their story to Dr. Starrenbach. Unlike in the original, this time Venus sits in on the dinner too, asking Makoto how he likes the food and what foods he ate back on Earth. The pleasant atmosphere is ruined, however, when the Bugram are brought up. Despite Venus telling them not to trouble their guests with talk of their enemies, Lons explains to them about the Bugram. Nothing changes for Nanami or Jinai for now, so I'll just skip their scenes. After discovering that there is no way to send them back home, Makoto and Mr. Fujisawa are summoned by Venus. As they enter her room, they see her standing beside Lons, looking sad and uncomfortable. She explains that she has a favor to ask Makoto before showing him the painting of herself in Fatora. After explaining that Fatora has gone missing, Venus is struggling to keep her voice steady and she mutters under her breath. He had taken so many precautions. No one could bear the thought of another royal child being lost. None of the others hear her and begin to explain to the two Earthlings about the Eye of God and the Holy War. They also say that an enemy had used it to deal a heavy blow to Rashtaria and the royal family especially, but don't go into any more detail. Finally, Venus and the others ask Makoto the million-dollar question. Will he help them by impersonating Princess Fatora? The moment Venus makes a request, Makoto agrees. Unlike in the original timeline, here Makoto has started to develop a friendship with Venus, so he's more inclined to help out. That night, when Makoto falls asleep, he finds himself in a large black expanse. A few feet away from him is a girl that looks just like him. Startled and confused, he calls out to the girl, getting her attention. Upon seeing Makoto, she flinches back in shock. More than a little freaked out, the girl demands that Makoto identifies himself. Makoto introduces himself and asks the girl's name. His eyes widen as the girl introduces herself as Fatora. Now, before continuing, I should explain what's going on. In the anime, all four Earthlings that travel to El-Hazard end up gaining special powers as a side effect of crossing dimensions. Now, my theory as to how these powers work is that it's linked to personality. Mr. Fujisawa is a strong person with a love of hiking and mountaineering, so he gets super strength. But he also has a lot of bad habits like smoking and drinking, so his strength is directly linked to how much alcohol or nicotine he has in his system. Naname is a girl that sees through even her own brother's lies and is brutally honest, so she gets the power to see through illusions. Jinai wants to control and lead, so he's given the power to communicate with those that would follow him. And Makoto is compassionate and empathetic, so he becomes what is essentially an empath/telepath for machines. What none of these characters have done, however, is world travel twice. We only see Makoto travel very briefly at the end of the first season. So who's to say that going through the process twice wouldn't give that person a second power? For Makoto, I just expanded on the power he already had in canon. Now he's an empath and telepath to both machines and people. It's also strengthened so he doesn't need to be touching someone to connect with them. However, he can only communicate without touch if that person is experiencing really strong emotions and when his own mind is calm. Hence why he's communicating with Fatora via dreams. Also, foreshadowing! For a reveal that was spoiled by the premise. Whatever. Makoto immediately starts asking Fatora questions and finds out that she was abducted by the Phantom Tribe. However, due to her being unconscious at the time, she has no idea where they've locked her up. She also suspects that there might be Phantom Tribe agents in the court. So she asks Makoto not to tell anyone about this until they can think of a plan. Makoto also tells Fatora of the plan to impersonate her, and they end up spending the rest of the night with her trying to help him better mimic her voice. All too soon, Makoto's body begins to fade, signaling that he's waking up. As he fades away, he promises Fatora that they'll speak again. A few days pass, and during that time, a lot of things happen. While Makoto slowly improves his Fatora impression, the main group also discover the link between Mr. Fujisawa's strength and his alcohol levels. Makoto does still visit Fatora in dreams, and she gives him her heads up about her girlfriend, warning him to watch the dark corner of her room as she likes to hide there. Eventually, the day of the summit arrives and Makoto meets Gallus, Venus's betrothed. Unlike in the original, here Makoto's Fatora impression is flawless, so Gallus doesn't make comments on him sounding odd or acting strange. Makoto, on the other hand, can't help but feel the anger boiling inside Gallus. He's always been able to pick up on how other people feel very easily, but this level of knowledge on how another person is feeling is not something he's used to. He knew Gallus was angry about something, but not what. In the end, Makoto comes to the conclusion that Gallus is angry that Venus had been attacked and he wasn't there to help her. She is his fiancée after all. The summit itself goes a lot more smoothly since Makoto had had time to prepare. So, no feet are shoved in mouths. When it's over, Venus even commends him for his acting with tears in her eyes, saying that it was like his sister really was there. Makoto considers telling her about his nightly visits with Fatora, but remembers Fatora's suspicions of Phantom Tribe agents and decides doing so would only put Venus in danger. Instead, he asks about the Eye of God. Venus's reaction is understandably negative. She tells Makoto that she doesn't want to talk about that thing and she doesn't want him asking about it. She even says that she'd prefer the thing was destroyed. Makoto is a little taken aback at Venus's reaction, quickly apologizing for bringing up a sensitive subject. Calming herself, Venus waves off Makoto's apology, telling him that it wasn't his fault and she shouldn't have snapped at him. The Eye of God just holds some very painful memories for her. Later that night, Makoto checks the corner like Fatora advised him to and sees a small blue-haired girl. Walking up to her, he asks her if she's Aliel. When a thoroughly confused Aliel confirms her identity and asks why Fatora is asking who she is, Makoto says that he'll explain in the morning. For now, he offers her to sleep in the bed while he sleeps on the couch. This leads to an amusing freakout from Mr. Fujisawa the next morning before he's told that Makoto had slept on the couch, after which he commends his student on his chivalry. While explaining the situation to her, Makoto considers telling her about his ability to visit Fatora through dreams, but again decides against it. With the situation explained to her, Aliel decides to accompany Makoto and Fujisawa to Mount Moldu. And that, everyone, is where I'm going to leave the story for now. Join me next time as the team meets the princesses of Mount Moldu and reunite with Genii. I'm Rune, see you next chapter. After arriving at Floristica, God, these names are a mouthful.